Yeah, thanks, Carter. We got our team back in the building this morning. Had a team meeting. Offense, defense met, and then got a chance to get back out in the weight room and get back out there and run, which is really probably the best medicine we need right now going forward, just to get back together again, start to rebuild our connection after an obviously disappointing on Saturday, and just get back to work. Because quite honestly, that's what's required. And so with that, I'll open up for questions.
Hey, Coach, wanted to ask you about De'Aaron King's upcoming decision. Not asking you to make any announcement here unless you want to, but I would assume you've talked to De'Aaron plenty about where things are with his decision for next year. And I'm just curious, at this stage now, do you have any idea or understanding at which direction he might be leaning?
No, I think, certainly to your point, we've spoken to him, and I heard what he said to you all last week. I think with most of our guys right now, to be honest, just the emotion of this past weekend and really the emotion of the entire football season. This has been a grind unlike any other that I've ever been around. And I think we've tried to encourage most of our guys that have any type of decision to make, let's get a little bit away from the emotion of this past Saturday, and really of the season. And then over the next week or so, I think we'll have another chance to maybe sit down again with De'Aaron and other guys as well, and just, sort of see where their mind is at. So, when it's time for him to let us know, I'm sure he will.
What are your thoughts just about how maybe another year and hopefully normal off season, and another year of playing against Power 5 competition for him, do you think that would help him develop his skills as a quarterback?
Absolutely. I don't think De'Aaron has ever been in the same offensive system 2 years in a row. And so just to be able to come back and have the continuity of staff and the players around him would be of immense benefit. And then really all you have to do is look at North Carolina on offense, year two in a system that's not really dissimilar to ours in some ways. And if you look at their numbers from last year to this year, they're different, and just the repetition and getting comfortable in doing it. And then the chemistry and all the things that we missed out on by losing, half of March, April, May, and June, and not even be able to throw 7-on-7 in the summer, so there's so much more, to be accomplished, I think, with our offensive personnel. And I think they feel that.
Hi, Manny. I wanted to ask about your confidence level and your defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, after what was obviously a historically bad defensive performance on Saturday. Is a change something that at this point even crosses your mind? And what conversations have you had with Blake since that game?
I mean, to me, look, I'll answer the question about staff really the same way I did a year ago, which is that, my feeling is that you wait for a season to end. You evaluate the season in its entirety. And then you do what's best to improve the football team, and it obviously worked for us a year ago. And I think, my job is to, again, get away from the emotion of results either in the super positive or in the super negative. We had a really bad result last weekend, and it doesn't hurt anybody more than it hurts Blake. And really, it's not just Blake; it's really the entire defensive staff. And it hurts me because obviously, defense is something that I've always taken pride in, and have never seen a day like this past Saturday. So right now, the focus is what we have to do is we have to rebuild. We have to rebuild it. We got to rebuild it for the bowl game. Whenever we find out where we're going and who we're playing, we got to put out a performance. Just remember, just 7 days ago, it was the exact opposite, right? I mean, 7 days ago, it might have been our best defensive performance of the year. Opposition certainly has something to say in that, but the extremes of how well we played one weekend to how poorly we played the other weekend. So my responsibility is to get it back on track as the head coach, and then Blake and our defensive staff right along in line to make sure that that's an outlier that we never see again.
I also wanted to ask just what this week is like for the team. Players you mentioned are doing some conditioning. Are they off from practice? And then coaches is right now just finalizing recruiting before the early signing period, the goal?
Yeah, we are. We're not going to practice this week. I do think our players just mentally need a little bit of a break. We will lift and we will run. I think the one thing we, speaking as a staff and really even just speaking with our medical people, this team needs some we need some activities together. We need to go do a community service event together. We need to get back together again and just continue to nurture our connection. It's easy, after all we've been through, to, especially a loss like Saturday, for everybody to kind of disperse, and break away of the strong connections that we've had throughout the course of the year. So we'll do a couple things also this week, just to try to build back. We have been so limited in what we've been able to do this year, in terms of just team bonding activities, and we take pride, Sherelle Jackson, in our athletic department, we take pride in being, either 1, 2, or 3 in the nation in community hours served. We've really been limited in what we've been able to do with that this year. So we like to see if we can push an opportunity with that, maybe push some other team building type things, and just get these guys who are so close and so connected to each other all year, get them back together again and away from Green Tree and chasing football around.
Hi, Manny. As an extension of what you were just talking about in terms of defense, I how things go when you have to take a loss like that, and I think there's a lot of confusion out here about the defensive side of the ball on a couple different levels. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys handle defense? Obviously, you're a head coach that was a defensive coordinator for 20 years, and people watch that and they say Blake Baker's got to be fired, and they're ready to put Blake's head on a chopping block. And so can you talk a little bit about just how you guys approach defense and game planning and calling a game on game day? My understanding has been that it's somewhat of a group effort. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you about as an extension of that is, I know that you've had some coronavirus issues on the defensive coaching staff the last few weeks. How much can you tell us about that? And, not looking to say make excuses or anything, but can you take us inside how that might have disrupted the defensive side of the football the last couple of weeks? And if you felt that had any effect on the, I guess disarray would be a good word for what we saw on Saturday?
Yeah, so kind of start with the first part of your question there. So, yeah, I mean, as a defensive staff, not really all that dissimilar to when I was defensive coordinator. We have a very tight staff. We have guys that have been together for a long time. We all game plan together, early throughout the course of the week. I'm in every defensive meeting that ever takes place. Blake, as a defensive coordinator, organizes all the practices. And I'm on the defensive field the entire time, during practice. And Blake calls the defenses on game day. And so that's been our MO now here for a couple of years. To your point, we did have some severe disruption with our defensive staff over the last couple of weeks. I don't, in terms of, trying to figure out that impact on a performance, I feel like that would, I can't measure that. I'm not going to get into that. I mean, I don't want to, there's no excuse for how we played defensively. But is it ideal to have, coaches missing from the game, coaches not being around their players, and we had some graduate assistants step in and other guys step in and did admirable jobs. But there's a reason why we have a staff the way we have. But nothing could point to a performance like what we did past Saturday. Everybody, including myself, has to take full ownership of it. And as I keep saying, what matters really is what happens now going forward. And we've got a chance to fix it and then take a look at where we are at the end of the year, which is ultimately my job.
Okay, and as an extension on the De'Eric conversation, with the name, image, likeness coming into play most likely in January, does that become a factor in maybe trying to get him to come back next year? Possibly, people in the community rallying together and getting him involved in endorsements, things like that might make it more appealing for him to wait a year to go try to take his shot in the National Football League?
I would hope so. I would hope that name, image, and likeness, when that gets voted in January and implemented there afterwards, I would hope that would help a lot of our young men, starting with De'Eric. But I think that's a great opportunity for our community, with South Florida, with all the commerce and, the size of our economy down here compared to, some of the programs that we have to compete against, I think that could be a boon for Miami Hurricanes football, and a chance for us to really rally around our players and in a proper and allowable way for those guys to be able to maximize their brand, and especially whether it's Derek being the brand of being the our starting quarterback, especially if he comes back next year, a year from now, and where he would rank in terms of returning quarterbacks in the country. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that that'll be the one thing that anyone says, here's why I'm returning, but it certainly can't hurt. And we're going into a new era of college football, not just with that, but with some other rules. But that's one I think we've got to take advantage of down here in South Florida.
Hi, Manny. Good afternoon. Because I'm old, I remember a time when you go to a bowl game and we'd say, boy, those 15 practices, they really mean a lot. And this year you're going to have what, like 3, 4? I mean, who knows how it's going to work. What can you hope to get out of the bowl game other than a 9th win? Of course, that goes without saying. In terms of development, is it even a deal this year? Does it even resonate because the practice time will be so short between you find out Sunday versus whenever you get on a bus or plane to go wherever you're going?
Yeah, it'll be different for sure. I mean, the whole experience will be different, which has been just on pace for 2020. Even just when you travel, what you can do when you're on the site, it's going to be almost a glorified road game for everybody that goes to a bowl. I don't know that the development, the old 15 practice development and getting an extra spring or half a spring practice, I don't think you'll see that this year. So what it's about for our guys is it's about recharging our batteries. And we feel like this football team has accomplished an awful lot this year. We feel like we have improved the program from where it was a year ago. And one of the things that we have kind of used as our battle cry throughout the year is let's go fix some of the things that haven't been done. Let's go accomplish some of the things that haven't been done here in the recent history. And winning a bowl game certainly factors in that, finishing in the top 20 or potentially the top 15 in the country. That sort of ticks a box there with that. And let's be able to look back in a year where nothing was normal. The opportunity to finish 9-2 in a season like this, where nothing's normal, I think we'll look back and say this was a major step forward for our program and a launching pad, as I mentioned that term before, to ultimately where we want to get to. There are some things that we really did well this year. There's obviously some things that we didn't do well. Most of them, pouring into one afternoon on Saturday. But this team has a lot to be proud of, and I want them to have one more occasion together to show, ideally more representative of what they've put over the course of the 9 games prior than the one game this past Saturday.
Manny, all that being said, I have to ask whether you finished 8-2, 8-3, or 9-2. A lot of schools around the country have said, Uncle, we've had enough. This year's been hell. It's time to send our kids home. Did you consider that at all? Did you talk about that with your leadership or anything like that, as far as maybe it's time to give these kids a break and not play the last game?
I think our players wanted to play, I think they express that. I will say, though, I think what it shows is how difficult this has been. You use the term uncle. And whether that is part of what caught up to us on Saturday, and that's a part of one piece of the puzzle that got us, it is, I get it. And I get it with these teams, and I get it with the decisions they made. I think we're helped a little bit, to be quite honest, with the fact that we're here in this state and we're not far from some potential bowl locations, which can make our methods of travel and things like that maybe different than some of the other schools that were out there. So it has been very difficult on these student athletes. But our guys, I think they need a proper reward at the end of the year. Not just going to a bowl, but having the opportunity to go win.
We knew there were going to be challenges at linebacker, having to replace Shaq and Pink and all that. And obviously you had guys coming back from injuries, freshmen that didn't get a chance to go through spring. But now that you've gone through the regular season, just your assessment of what you have at linebacker and, kind of what you got to do to get it right.
Well, we've been inconsistent at linebacker all year. And then, to throw in that we had a lot of disruption at linebacker with guys unavailable over the last few weeks. So our practice, guys that we were counting on, their practice reps were really limited, and I think that showed Saturday evening. We certainly did not play well. Linebacker didn't play well in our front seven really at all on Saturday. So, but we like the talent we have. We really like the young talent we have. We got to get some time to develop these guys. We got to get them on the field, and that's where we got to get a spring practice. We got to get a normal off-season program, and then a couple of the ones that we have coming in as signees, we think very highly of as well. So, I think the last few groups, the last 3 recruiting classes at linebacker, there are guys in there that can do it and do the job as required at Miami. Multiple guys, and we got to have a good old-fashioned competition this spring. God willing, that we get a normal spring and turn a position that has been inconsistent for us to a potential strength of our defense.
And then safety and corner, obviously, and scholarship number wise, you guys were hurt obviously by losing Al, but cornerback, I know that's a big priority in the recruiting class, I'm assuming. Can you talk about that? And then safeties, you had the 3 upperclassmen. Have you talked to those guys, and have they told you at all if they might be coming back next year?
Yeah, let's start with the safeties. I think they're the answer I mentioned earlier with Derek. We have spoken to those guys. I think no one's mind is fully made up one way or another, and so we'll circle back on that before the bowl. Some guys' mind may not be made up until after the bowl. Some guys' mind may not be made up until the middle of January. But yeah, we'll continue. Again, we really feel good about some of the safeties we've signed in this class, and then corners, and we still think we'll add a corner here shortly, and probably maybe even another one after the turn. So the things you can't predict anymore, losing guys to the portal, that type of stuff, so you always got to be on your toes recruiting wise and be able to add our numbers. It certainly hurt us, and they were able to hit 2 big plays in man coverage in the game, both great throws. But that's where you just got to continue to develop that position and get ourselves to where we want to be.
Manny, you touched on this a little bit, but last week when Mike Krzyzewski said Duke is no longer playing, he decided not to play any more non-conference games. He said the players needed a mental break, a mental health break, let them go home, see their families, some sense of normalcy for a little bit. This has been such a grind. Did you guys, how much were you aware of or the concern for their mental health this year? We talk all about physical health, but how much are you concerned about that this year? Did you ever come to a point like he's feeling now? And I know basketball players have been, this season's just starting, so they're going to be in it longer. Did you ever see a point where you said, my gosh, these guys just mentally, this is, they need a break? And, what was that like for you guys in monitoring that mental health?
We try to provide, all the assistance that we can. But Tom, absolutely. No more obvious than when I tested positive, and you go to your house and you put yourself in a room and you shut the door and you say, I'm going to stay right here in this room, for the next 10 days. We've had players that have been alone in a dorm room for 14 days. We've had players that have had to sit alone in a dorm room for more than one 14-day period. Think about that. It's crazy, We talk about, some of the guys that we had expectations for this year, and they didn't have a chance to even learn from week to week because of not just not being able to play. I mean, guys have sprained ankles and hurt themselves in football, but they're in the training room, they're around their guys. And I'm only talking for the University of Miami, but I imagine this is the case everywhere. And also, because our disruption came during the season. Everyone's had to deal with this, but some schools had it in the summertime, and as they got into the season, they've had very little disruption. Our disruption came during the season, and to sit there and have the airplane leave, and you're leaving 15 guys, not just behind. I mean, you always leave some guys that are on the travel squad, but leaving them sort of holed up in a hotel room or in a dorm room or whatever, and that's really tough. That's really tough, and that's why the team being together has been so important for us this year. And that's why, being close and being connected, being able to stay together has been so important. That's why we're going to try to do some things this week to just try to, almost for our mental health, because if you sit around and really ponder what we've been through, it can wear you down. And then obviously we were emotionally worn down Saturday, you know, and that's my responsibility to make sure that we're excited to play and focused and locked in. And we weren't. I mean, we weren't, you know, like I said, you know, Clemson beat our ass, but we were engaged, you know what I mean, in that game, and we were there, and we were, you know, we weren't good enough ultimately. And I'm not taking anything away from North Carolina. They played amazing, but we were distant. And, you know, and we spoke about it as a team today. It was just that we were emotionally bankrupt. And that was hard to predict by the way that we practiced. It was hard to predict by the way we had been, even at the hotel. We got the news the night before that we wouldn't be playing. You would think it'd been the opposite, you know. I mean, it's like all hands on deck, you know, one time, here we go. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And that's what we talked about this morning. Our team meeting is trying to identify the signs. You know, what we want to use yesterday is what we used last year. The ending of last year is, you know, our players saw what got us at the end of last year. And to be honest, that's a part of the reason why we made such a big jump this year. They saw the selfishness, some of the individual decisions that were made. And this team sort of vowed not to be that team. And that is a mission accomplished. That's one of the great things we've done this year. And whatever, you know, some of the things that cause us to not be as connected and cause us to not, you know, whatever happened, you know, let's, you know, inside the building, I'm not worried about assessing blame because the blame's on everybody. And now let's not worry about blame. Let's worry about how to fix it, how to recognize it, and then never have that happen again.
So you talked about, you know, discussing all this stuff with your players and what happened. What was their take? I know what your take is. Did they participate a lot in this conversations you've had, and what are some of their perceptions without saying who said what?
We had some in small groups, you know, but and we'll meet. We're going to meet as a staff later this afternoon and kind of, you know, debrief some of what was said. And right now it's raw, you know. It's still so raw, and guys are sensitive on how it played and how it played out, and you want to just be able to create a stage and a platform that if somebody felt like they were something they had to say, that, you know, that they could speak up. But there was just something, the feedback I got, I even got this in the fourth quarter on the sideline of the game, is that somehow our attention just, it's like maybe we've, you know, I've had multiple guys say it's like when the end of the season became close, it's like we lost our focus. And you know, like it just became we you know, it obviously, you can tell, Susan, it's hard for me to explain, you know, and it's because it's hard for them to explain because it doesn't make any sense. And yet there it is. So that's just a part of it. There's no one thing. If there was one thing, it would be easy to identify, and you'd have 100 guys saying the same thing. It's never one thing, and that's just always the way it is in a game. We're always looking for the one silver bullet, and that's just not the way the world often works.
And then the other thing is, well, a couple things. Do you feel that they're still together, you know, and they're still close, and there's no blame being laid on anybody, on each other? Sometimes that happens, you know, after a loss. And then lastly, I want to make sure I get this in. Has anybody opted out for the bowl game?
No one's made any decisions yet. And like I said, we've told everybody, listen, just whatever you're thinking, just process it during the week. There's no decision to be made right now anyway. We don't even know what bowl game we're going to and won't until next Sunday. And then what you're asking about, you know, if I got what you're asking correctly, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm certain there's some hurt feelings, you know, because to have a loss that heavy, you know, nobody wants to feel as if they're the one responsible for it. And that's what we talked about. Look, there was no one on film that if you watch him play, you're like, oh yeah, this guy, poof, boy, you know, I mean, we you know, if we just replaced this guy with that guy, it would have been different, you know. I mean, everybody had a hand in it, both sides of the ball. And so, you know, look, let's not get into the, you know, you could have done this better, I could have done this better. Everybody could have done something better, starting with me. Let's own it, and let's stop worrying about, you know, who's at fault, and let's start figuring out how to fix it, you know. And the big thing we talk about is let's not let our, you know, present circumstance think that that dictates our future outcome, because that's what people want to try to put on you, that you've got this present circumstance, and therefore, because it looks like this right now in the present, then your future will be like this. And we talked about it. We talked about where we were a year ago. Look at what our present circumstance was 365 days ago. Would it have predicted our current, the outcome we had this past year, the future outcome? Look at where a Jalen Phillips present circumstance was a year ago and where he is now. So things can change if you believe that they can change, and you hold yourself accountable, and you put the work in. And that's simply what it comes down to. Let's put ourselves into account inside this building, which we are, and then let's get back to work, which is what started today.